The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. At first, the scientists at Earth's Deep Space Listening Post thought their equipment was malfunctioning. The quantum signals were unlike anything they had seen before, pulsing with patterns that shouldn't have been possible. Within hours, every screen on Earth displayed the same message. To the species of Sol 3, you have been chosen. Tom Walker stood at attention in the United Earth Defense Headquarters, his weathered face reflecting the soft blue glow of the holographic displays. Around him, the world's top military leaders and scientists huddled in groups, their worried whispers filling the room. At 45 years old, Walker had seen his share of strange things as a captain in the Earth Defense Fleet. But this was different. "Captain Walker," General Adams called out, his voice cutting through the noise. "Step forward." The room fell silent as Walker approached the central platform. Above it, the alien message rotated slowly in three-dimensional text, casting strange shadows across the faces of those gathered. "The Watchers," the general began. "That's what they call themselves. They're part of something called the Galactic Council. They've been watching us for quite some time, it seems." Walker nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the chill that ran down his spine. The idea that Earth had been under observation wasn't new, but confirmation was something else entirely. "They've issued a challenge," Adams continued, bringing up new displays. "Actually, a series of them. According to this, it's how they evaluate emerging species for." He paused, checking his notes. "Galactic citizenship." The hologram shifted, showing strange landscapes and impossible structures. "Other species are participating. Some we've never heard of, some that are far more advanced than us. But here's the thing, Captain, we get to choose our representative. And you're it." Walker blinked, his military training barely keeping his surprise in check. "Sir, with all due respect, why me? We have better soldiers, smarter scientists." A woman stepped forward from the shadows. Dr. Miller, head of Psychology. Walker recognized her from briefings. "Because, Captain Walker, you're human. Completely and utterly human. When your ship was attacked by pirates in the Kuiper Belt, you didn't just fight them off. You convinced half of them to surrender and the other half to join Earth's defense forces. When the Mars colony faced that radiation crisis, you didn't just evacuate the colonists, you stayed behind and rigged up a solar shield from mining equipment." She smiled, but her eyes remained serious. The Watcher's message included profiles of the other species champions. "They're all specialists, perfect warriors, perfect scientists, perfect diplomats. But humanity, we're different, we're adaptable. And you, Captain Walker, are the most adaptable person we've got." The general nodded in agreement. "The first challenge begins in 48 hours. We don't know what it is. We don't know what we're up against. Hell, we barely understand the technology they use to contact us. But we do know this: humanity isn't going to back down." Walker looked at the holographic displays, studying the strange symbols and alien landscapes. In his gut, he knew this was bigger than just a series of tests. This was humanity's first real step into a larger universe, and how they performed would shape Earth's future for generations to come. "I accept," he said simply, his voice steady and clear. The room erupted in activity. Scientists rushed to prepare equipment they barely understood. Military strategists began plotting contingencies for scenarios they could only imagine. But Walker stood still, watching the message rotate above him. As the others bustled around him, Dr. Miller approached again. "Captain," she said quietly, "there's one more thing you should know. In all the recorded history they sent us, no species has ever passed all their challenges." Walker allowed himself a small smile. "Then I guess it's time someone did." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparations, briefings, and equipment checks. As the final hours ticked down, Walker stood ready in the newly constructed quantum transmission chamber. He was dressed in Earth's most advanced combat suit, though compared to what they'd seen of alien technology, it might as well have been made of paper. The chamber hummed to life. filling with a soft, purple light. Walker took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Whatever waited on the other side, he would face it the way humans always face the impossible, with determination, creativity, and that uniquely human blend of caution and courage. The last thing he heard before the quantum field enveloped him was General Adams' voice. "Show them what humanity can do, Captain." Then the chamber flashed, and humanity's greatest challenge began. The purple light faded, and Walker found himself standing in a dense jungle. The air was thick and hot, filled with strange scents he had never smelled before. 2 suns hung in the alien sky, one blue, one orange, casting weird shadows through the massive leaves above. Around him, other competitors materialized. Walker counted 6 different alien species. Some looked almost human, while others were completely beyond his understanding. All wore advanced survival suits that made his Earth-made gear look ancient. A booming voice echoed through the jungle. "Welcome to Trial World 7. Your challenge is simple: survive for 7 planetary cycles. Beware, you are not alone." As if on cue, a distant roar shook the trees. Walker noticed the other competitors immediately activating their high-tech gear. Force fields sparkled to life, and weapon systems hummed with power. One alien, tall and covered in metallic scales, sneered at Walker's simple equipment. "Your species is barely out of its caves," it said in perfectly translated speech. "You should forfeit now." Walker just smiled and checked his basic supplies. A knife, some rope, a water filter, and basic medical supplies. While the others stood around showing off their technology, he studied the environment. The soil, the plants, the way the wind moved, everything told a story. That attention to detail saved his life an hour later, while a massive predator, something like a cross between a tiger and a praying mantis, tore through the force field of the metallic alien like it was paper. Walker was already safely hidden in a carefully prepared blind. He watched as, one by one, the other competitors made the same mistake. They trusted their advanced gear, thinking it would protect them. But the creatures of this world had evolved to hunt beings with that kind of technology. Energy fields and plasma weapons meant nothing to them. By the end of the first day, 3 competitors had been eliminated, their fancy suits torn to pieces. Walker had built a simple shelter high in the trees, using techniques passed down from ancient human cultures. He found water by watching the behavior of small flying creatures and identified safe fruits by carefully testing them the way human explorers had done for thousands of years. On the 3rd day, the remaining aliens finally noticed something strange. The predators rarely attacked Walker. While they cowered behind failing shields, he moved through the jungle almost freely. They didn't understand that he had learned to move with the wind, masking his scent. He had studied the predator's behavior and learned their patterns. He wasn't fighting against nature. He was working with it. The 4th day brought acid rain that ate through even the most advanced materials. While the others panicked, Walker had already noticed how certain broad leaves repelled the deadly drops. He made a simple but effective rain cover and waited out the storm. By the 6th day, Walker was the only one still in the competition. The others had either been eliminated by predators or given up when their technology failed them. He sat by a small, carefully concealed fire, cooking a meal of safe plants he had gathered. That's when he heard it, a sound bigger than anything before. The ground shook as something massive approached his position. The final test had arrived. Through the trees came a creature that seemed impossible. It was as big as a house, with dozens of eyes and countless sharp limbs. Its armor plating gleamed in the dual sunlight, and its roar made the very air vibrate. The other competitors had tried to fight similar beasts with their advanced weapons. All had failed. Walker looked at the monster, then at his simple knife, and smiled. Sometimes, the old ways were the best ways. As the creature charged, Walker remembered all the nature documentaries he had watched as a kid, all the survival training he had received, and most importantly, the countless generations of human ancestors who had survived against overwhelming odds with nothing but their wits. He took a deep breath and readied himself. It was time to show the galaxy why humans had become Earth's apex predators, with nothing but their brains, their tools, and their determination. The beast attacked, and the real test began. Walker barely had time to catch his breath after surviving the jungle world before the purple light surrounded him again. This time, he materialized in what looked like a giant glass cube floating in space. Stars twinkled all around, creating a dizzying effect. The same competitors who had failed the jungle trial were there too, restored and ready for the new challenge. The Watcher's voice boomed through the space. "Welcome to the pattern maze. Solve the puzzles. Find the exit. Survive the consequences of wrong answers." In front of each competitor appeared a control panel with strange symbols. The glass walls of the cube began to fill with moving patterns of light, each one more complex than the last. The alien with metallic scales, who Walker now knew was called First Seeker, immediately began calculating with its advanced neural computer. The others did the same, their technology processing millions of possibilities per second. Walker just watched. He noticed something none of the others seemed to see. The patterns weren't just random. They reminded him of things from Earth. The way water rippled in a pond, how clouds formed before a storm, the growth patterns of shells on a beach. The first puzzle asked them to predict how the pattern would evolve. The aliens input complex mathematical formulas. Walker drew what reminded him of the way leaves spread on a growing vine. He was right. They were wrong. Impossible. First Seeker hissed. "Your species doesn't even have quantum computing. How did you solve it?" Walker shrugged. "Sometimes the answer isn't in the math. It's in the story the pattern tells." As the puzzles got harder, the consequences for wrong answers became more severe. One alien was frozen in a block of ice after failing. Another was trapped in a cage of energy. Their technology, designed to think in straight lines and perfect calculations, couldn't grasp the fluid nature of the challenges. But Walker saw what they couldn't. One pattern moved like a flock of birds avoiding a predator. Another flowed like sand dunes in the wind. Each puzzle wasn't just about logic. It was about understanding the natural principles that shaped the universe. The sixth puzzle stumped everyone. The pattern seemed to break every rule they had learned. The aliens' computers sparked and smoked as they tried to calculate the solution. But Walker started laughing. "What amuses you, human?" asked a floating creature made of crystal. "It's a joke," Walker said. "The pattern isn't supposed to make sense. It's testing whether we can recognize nonsense when we see it." He pressed a button labeled with what looked like a laughing face. The pattern dissolved into a shower of sparks, and a door appeared in his section of the cube. The Watcher's voice returned. "The human speaks truth. Not all patterns must be solved. Some must be accepted as beyond solution." First Seeker's voice shook with anger. "This is not fair. The solutions defy logic." "That's your problem," Walker said kindly. "You think everything has to follow strict rules. But sometimes the universe just does what it wants. Humans learned that lesson a long time ago. It's why we still write poetry even though we have computers. It's why we dance even though walking is more efficient." The final puzzle appeared. This time, all the aliens looked to Walker before trying to solve it. He studied the shifting lights and remembered something his grandmother used to say. "Sometimes you have to stop thinking with your head and start thinking with your heart." The pattern reminded him of music, not the mathematical precision of a computer song, but the wild, natural rhythms of human music. Jazz, blues, rock. Music that broke rules and made new ones. He began tapping the controls in a rhythm that matched the pattern's flow. The other aliens watched in confusion as the lights began to pulse with his beat. Then, one by one, they understood. This wasn't a puzzle to be solved. It was a dance to be joined. As the last alien finally let go of their rigid thinking and joined the rhythm, the entire cube filled with brilliant light. They had passed the test, not by conquering the pattern, but by becoming part of it. The watcher's voice held a note of surprise. Perhaps we have underestimated the value of illogical thinking. Walker smiled as the purple light began to shine again. Logic is good for building spaceships, he said, but sometimes you need a little chaos to understand the stars. The purple light faded to reveal complete darkness. Walker couldn't see his hand in front of his face. The air was still, neither hot nor cold. There was no sound except his own breathing. "Welcome to the void," the watcher's voice whispered in his mind. "Here, you face yourself." Small lights began to appear, showing the other competitors in their own dark bubbles of space. First Seeker paced in his bubble like a caged animal. The crystalline alien had already started to dim, its usual bright glow fading. "Each of you will experience your deepest fears, your greatest failures, your darkest moments," the voice continued. "Those who maintain their sanity will proceed. Those who break will leave. There is no shame in surrender." The darkness around Walker shifted, becoming the bridge of his old ship, the horizon. He knew what was coming. They were making him relive his worst memory. The scene played out just as it had 5 years ago. The pirate attack. The choice between saving his crew or saving a ship full of civilian refugees. In reality, he had managed to save both through a desperate gamble. But here in the void, the scene changed. Here, he failed. He watched his crew die, heard the screams of the refugees. Over and over, the scene repeated, each time slightly different, but always ending in failure. In the brief moments between visions, he could see the other competitors struggling with their own nightmares. First Seeker was thrashing against invisible bonds. The crystalline being's light had dimmed to almost nothing. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time had no meaning in the void. Walker lost count of how many times he'd watched his people die. But something strange was happening. Instead of breaking him, each replay showed him something new. Different choices he could have made. Lessons to be learned. That's when he understood. This wasn't just about enduring pain. It was about how you dealt with failure. "You're right," he said aloud to the darkness. "I could have failed. Every decision I make could lead to disaster. But that's what makes us human. We know we might fail, but we try anyway." The visions kept coming, but now Walker watched them with different eyes. He studied them like training simulations, learning from each alternate disaster. One by one, the other competitors began to crack. The crystalline being simply faded away, giving up. First Seeker fought until his mind snapped, his bubble filling with wild, uncontrolled energy before he vanished. Only 3 remained. Walker, a shadow-shifting alien named Deep Thought, and a being of pure energy called Bright Wave. They had each found their own way to cope with the endless psychological torture. That's when the true test began. The Watcher's voice returned. "Now, reach out to each other." Walker suddenly felt the emotional pain of his fellow competitors. Deep Thought's centuries of loneliness, Bright Wave's fear of fading into nothing. And they could feel his pain too. Every death he'd witnessed, every hard choice he'd made. Most species would have collapsed under the combined weight of so much suffering. But humans had something special. The ability to share pain, to help others carry their burdens. Walker called out to his fellow survivors. "On Earth, we have a saying. A burden shared is a burden halved. We're all carrying something heavy. Maybe we could carry it together." Through the dark space between their bubbles, Walker reached out. After a moment's hesitation, Deep Thought and Bright Wave reached back. Their shared pain didn't disappear, but it became manageable. Together, they found strength they didn't have alone. The Watcher's voice held a note of wonder. "Fascinating. Most species try to block the pain or fight through it alone. You chose to connect." Walker smiled in the darkness. "That's what humans do. We're not the strongest or the smartest, but we know how to stand together, how to share our fears and hopes, how to turn pain into strength." The darkness began to lift, and the purple light returned. They had passed the test, not by being unbreakable, but by learning to bend without breaking, and by helping others do the same. The purple light deposited Walker in what looked like a massive library. Towering shelves reached up into darkness, filled with glowing data crystals instead of books. Floating platforms moved between the shelves, carrying competitors who had passed the previous trials. Your next challenge, the Watchers announced, is to find the knowledge that will save your world from a crisis. You have 6 hours. Work alone or face disqualification. Holographic screens appeared before each competitor, showing their homeworlds facing different disasters. Walker's screen showed Earth being approached by a massive asteroid, bigger than anything their weapons could handle. First Seeker had returned, restored after his breakdown in the void. He immediately flew to the highest shelves, his neural computer scanning thousands of crystals per second. The other competitors spread out, each searching frantically for their answers. Walker stayed still, thinking. Something wasn't right. The library was too big, the time too short. Even with advanced technology, searching all these crystals would take weeks. He noticed Deep Thought lingering nearby, looking uncertain. Their shared experience in the void had created a connection. Against the rules, Walker spoke up. "What crisis are you facing?" Deep Thought hesitated, then whispered, "A plague that turns worlds to crystal." Brightwave overheard and drifted closer. "My star is dying." Walker looked at their screens, then at his asteroid. A pattern emerged. "These aren't separate problems," he said. "They're connected. Look, the asteroid's composition matches your crystal plague, and its course was altered by unusual solar activity like your dying star." First Seeker shouted from above, "Silence. The rules demand we work alone." But other competitors had started listening. Their problems all connected somehow. A web of cause and effect that no single solution could fix. "The Watchers want us to fail," Walker said loudly. "They've designed a problem too big for any one species to solve. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the real test is whether we're willing to break their rules to save each other." First Seeker descended, his metallic scales gleaming. "You would risk disqualification. To save my world. To save all our worlds." "Yes." Walker held out his hand. "On Earth, we learned the hard way that the biggest problems can only be solved together." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Deep Thought glided forward, placing a shadowy tendril in Walker's hand. Brightwave joined next, adding their warm glow. One by one, others joined, even First Seeker, who grudgingly extended a metallic claw. They shared their information, combined their search patterns. Walker taught them human brainstorming techniques, how to build on each other's ideas, how to think creatively together. The aliens shared their advanced knowledge, which Walker helped piece together in unexpected ways. The Watcher's voice boomed. "You have broken the primary rule. The test is—" "No," First Seeker interrupted, surprising everyone. "The human is right. These problems affect all our worlds. The real test must be whether we can overcome our divisions to face a greater challenge." The library trembled. The data crystals glowed brighter. And then something unprecedented happened. The Watchers appeared. They were tall, glowing beings with dozens of eyes. They looked down at the gathered competitors with what might have been surprise. "In 10,000 years of trials," they said, "no species has ever chosen to work together. Each tried to prove their superiority alone. Each failed." Walker stood firm. "Then maybe it's time for a change. We're stronger together than apart. Isn't that worth more than proving who's best?" The Watchers conferred silently. The library held its breath. Finally, they spoke. "You have passed a test we did not know we were giving. Perhaps it is we who have something to learn." The purple light began to glow again, but this time it felt different, warmer, like a new dawn breaking over all their worlds. The purple light transported the remaining competitors to a vast arena floating in space. Millions of alien spectators filled floating seats around them. The Watchers appeared on a high platform, their many eyes glowing with intense light. "Welcome to the final trial. they announced, their voice echoing through space. Only one species can join the Galactic Council. Fight. The last one standing wins everything. The losers' worlds remain isolated forever. Walker looked at his newfound allies. Deep Thought's shadows swirled with concern. Brightwave's energy flickered nervously. First Seeker's metallic scales rattled with tension. Energy weapons appeared in front of each competitor. They were the most powerful weapons Walker had ever seen, each capable of eliminating an opponent with a single shot. "This is wrong," Walker said, letting his weapon float away. "Everything we learned in the previous trials, survival, understanding patterns, facing our fears, working together, it all taught us that being alone makes us weaker." First Seeker grabbed his weapon. "But only one species can win. Those are the rules." "Rules?" Walker laughed. "The rules said we couldn't work together in the library. But we did, and we all succeeded. The rules said we had to face our fears alone in the void. But we shared our burden, and we grew stronger." He turned to face the Watchers. "You've been ruling the galaxy for thousands of years, keeping species separate, making them compete. But look what we achieved when we worked together for just a few hours." Deep Thought moved to Walker's side, letting their weapon drift away. "The human speaks truth. In the library, we solved in hours what none of us could solve alone in years." Brightwave joined them, their glow strengthening. "In the void, we survived by sharing our strength." One by one, other competitors let their weapons go. Only First Seeker remained armed, his metallic face unreadable. "This is a test," Walker said to him, "but not the one they claim. They want to see if we'll throw away everything we learned just to win, if we'll betray our allies for power." The Watcher's eyes flashed. "You dare question our wisdom? We have maintained galactic peace for millennia through controlled competition." "Peace through fear isn't peace," Walker replied. "It's just a prison with invisible walls." First Seeker looked at his weapon, then at Walker. "In the library, you could have kept the solution to yourself. Why help us?" "Because that's what humans do. We compete, yes, but we also cooperate. We fight, but we also make peace. We're not perfect, but we learn and grow. And we do it better together." The arena hummed with tension. Millions of alien spectators watched in silence. The Watcher's eyes blazed with anger. First Seeker raised his weapon. The Watchers leaned forward eagerly. Walker stood his ground, unafraid. Then First Seeker turned and fired, not at his fellow competitors, but at the energy barrier separating the arena from the spectators. The barrier shattered like glass. "I choose alliance over isolation," First Seeker declared, letting his weapon dissolve. The spectators erupted in chaos. Many of them were species who had failed previous trials, forced to watch new competitors year after year. Now they floated down into the arena, joining the rebels. The Watchers rose up, their forms growing larger, more threatening. "You would destroy thousands of years of order." "No," Walker said, standing with his allies as the arena filled with unity. "We would build something better. A galaxy where species help each other grow instead of fighting to prove who's best." Light began to flood the arena, but this time it wasn't purple. It was golden, warm, created by Brightwave and the energy beings in the crowd. Deep Thought and the shadow creatures provided cooling darkness. First Seeker and his kind added their metallic strength. Walker smiled as humans would, with hope in his eyes and determination in his heart. The real challenge wasn't winning against each other. It was working together to build something new. 1 year after the rebellion in the arena, Walker stood in the newly built Hall of Unity on a space station orbiting a neutral star. The hall was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Crystal walls from Deep Thought's people caught the light from Brightwave's starfolk, while First Seeker's kind had provided the strong metallic framework. The old Galactic Council chamber had been a place of cold judgment. This new hall was alive with the combined achievements of dozens of species working together. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," Deep Thought said, their shadowy form rippling with happiness. They were now the head of the Interspecies Science Coalition, where different races shared their knowledge freely. Walker nodded. Even harder to believe, the Watchers finally agreed to change. The ancient species had resisted at first, but faced with the united will of so many species, they had eventually seen the truth. Some now sat on the new council, sharing their wisdom rather than just their judgment. First Seeker approached, his metallic scales now decorated with symbols of alliance rather than conquest. "The latest reports are in," he said, his voice warm with excitement. "The combined fleet has successfully diverted the asteroid heading for Earth. My people's quantum drives, combined with Brightwave's energy manipulation and your human targeting calculations, it worked perfectly." Walker smiled. The same crisis that they had faced in the library trial had actually appeared, but this time they were ready. Working together, they had solved in days what might have taken centuries to figure out alone. "And the crystal plague on your world?" Walker asked, deep thought. "Cured," they replied. "Human medical researchers found the link between the plague and certain radio frequencies. Once we knew what to look for, the solution was simple." The main doors opened, and representatives from 100 worlds filed in for the day's council session. Among them walked the newest addition, a group of young species who would once have been forced to compete in the trials. Now they were welcomed as equals, offered help and guidance instead of challenges and threats. Brightwave floated down from where they had been, helping adjust the hall's lighting. "The Watchers' old records show something interesting," they said. "Humans weren't the first species to suggest cooperation. But you were the first to show how it could work, and to stand firm when it meant risking everything." Walker watched as the hall filled with life and energy. Species that would never have met under the old system now worked together, solving problems that had plagued their worlds for generations. "We didn't win by being the strongest or smartest," he said. "We won by being stubborn enough to believe there was a better way, and brave enough to try it." First Seeker made a sound that Walker had learned was laughter. "That's why they should never challenge humans. You don't play by the rules. You change the game entirely." The session was about to begin. Walker took his place, not at the head of the council, but as one voice among many. Earth had been offered a leading role, but he had declined. True cooperation meant no single species should dominate. As he looked around the hall, he saw the future they had built together. Deep Thought's shadows provided cooling where needed. Brightwave's people lit the darkest corners. First Seeker's kind built bridges between worlds. And humans did what they did best. They found new ways to bring people together. In the end, Walker said quietly, "We didn't win the challenges. We ended them. And that's the most human victory of all." The council session began, and with it another day of species working together to build something greater than any could have achieved alone. The stars outside seemed to shine brighter, as if they too approved of this new way. After all, that was the greatest lesson humanity had taught the galaxy. True victory isn't about beating everyone else. It's about helping everyone rise together.